welcome. We're pleased to have you join us from Battlefield Business, translating military skills into civilian success. Today we want to talk about the unique skill set that make our veterans attractive employees and how employers and investors, for those of you in the room, can do a better job at harnessing those skills, that expertise, and that experience, and better capture aspects of military culture to better and grow your businesses. My name is Susan Fallon Brown. I'm delighted to be your moderator this afternoon. I'm with Monster and military.com, and part of my job at Monster is advancing all of our veteran employment programs, primarily through our subsidiary military.com. We're the country's leading resource to help connect service members, transitioning, and veterans with employers that are seeking their talents and skills. I am not a veteran, but I am a Navy brat of many years, married to a Marine, and have been very active in the military transition space, going on about 10 years, not unlike my colleagues on stage here. Now, I promise it is not a personal bias that we are so well represented by the sea services on this panel this afternoon, both the Navy and the Marine Corps. But I can assure you that the experience and the skills that these talented gentlemen represent are every bit indicative of the skill set, the experience, the tenacity, and the dedication and purpose-driven approach to business and life that you will find with their brothers and sisters in the Army, the Air Force, and of course the Coast Guard. So as we begin our discussion, I'd like to take a quick pulse check with our audience today. I can see we have quite a few service members in attendance. I think you're part of our Milken Military Fellows program. So thank you very much for being with us. Hope you're enjoying the program. We're delighted to have you part of this conversation. Are there other veterans in the audience that have served both either with the U.S. or perhaps some of our allied forces? I know I've met several Canadians and French and Israeli participants here at the conference. Well, good. So we're not starting entirely from scratch with an audience that is not as familiar with some of the challenges facing military transition and our veteran employment today. So as we talk about this highly skilled, very rich and diverse, talented labor pool, I thought we'd start by asking our panelists to tell you a little bit about their personal experience, both in uniform, through their transition, and some of the amazing things they're doing today, both in business as well as to advance the success of their fellow veterans. And with that, Chris, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So my name's Chris Perkins. I served in the Marine Corps for 9 years. I'm an Iraq veteran. When I made the transition, it was kind of like finding the A-Team, if you ever saw that show. There were people that really wanted to help you, but you had to find them. And luckily for me, I found those folks. I was able to make the transition into financial services. So I went from Ramadi, where I got blown up, to Lehman Brothers, where I got blown up. And then I ended up at Citi. And at Citi, I tried to start a veterans network at Lehman Brothers. They weren't quite ready for it. And this is going back 10 years ago. When I raised my hand at Citi, they thought it was a great idea. And we initiated the first veterans network at Citi, one of the first on Wall Street in 2009. And the idea was to institutionalize our support of transitioning veterans. Why? Because we think it's good business. I've been on the battlefield with the men and women in uniform. I know what they can do. And the really interesting thing about veterans is they come with all the stuff we can't teach them. We can teach them the finance, we can teach them the bond math, but we can't teach them, the teamwork, the leadership, the experience under pressure, the creativity and the innovation that all of you guys see. People don't realize it, but the innovation that I saw in the military was just profound. So anyway, started the first Veterans Network in 2009 to kind of bring the community together, to institutionalize that support. The intent was to recruit, retain, mentor, and then conduct community outreach. And it was pretty cool. It was successful, in fact. Today we've got 16 networks across Citi. We opened our first network in the UK. We've got about 3,000 employees across the firm that are dedicated to helping us out. It's a pretty good story. But the problem that you have if you're a firm and you're in the network space, and I run a derivatives business, by the way, was that the networks fall within diversity, which is great, but there's some things you can do and there's some things you can't do. And so we decided to break out of that governance, and we established something called Citi Salutes, which is our one-stop shop where we can leverage all the firm's assets outside of the diversity chain to, again, provide financial education. We do community outreach and fundraising. In fact, we hired a team of dedicated military veterans recruiters that are out there trying to hire 1,000 veterans a year. And we're going to talk about it today and some of the challenges that we face, but we've only been able to hire about 700 or so in the last couple of years. We're one of the largest technology companies in the world, and we're trying to get our message out, leveraging technology, that we're not just bank tellers, right? We've got everything from investment bankers to project managers to operations, et cetera, across the world. So the network story is great. City Salutes is great. That's our one-stop shop. But then we also realize that as an industry, Wall Street doesn't necessarily have the greatest reputation, but we realize that we could do a lot for our industry to attract talent by being competitors second and being veterans and supporters of veterans first. And so back in 2011 or so, we launched VOWS, Veterans on Wall Street, which has been an incredible success. Again, we put aside our competitive differences and we shared best practices around recruiting retention. We started raising money as well, and we found out that we're pretty good at raising money. We've raised around $6 million in the last 5 years. We could probably do a better job than that. But we're really bad about giving it out. And so we ended up having a strategic relationship with Bob Woodward Foundation, who does a lot of it for us. But in the last year, and I'll finish up here, we decided that we wanted to make this network bigger and broader. So then rather than just have a couple of banks participating in VOWS, we opened it up to now 70 firms. And so there's no cost to join. If you're in a corporation and you'd like to join, please give me a call. We'll sign you right up. Essentially, we're seeking to better institutionalize our support of vets across financial services and beyond. So VOWS continues to grow, and again, it's about recruiting. And now I think we're shifting our focus towards retention. How do we keep these people? How do we not give them jobs, but how do we find them careers where they're going to flourish? And it's about establishing that institutionalization.
Great. Thanks, Chris, for that overview. We'll come back in a few minutes, especially around that retention issue. But next, let me introduce Brendan Hart, and who's the founder and CEO of Prosper Labs and ThriveX.
Yep.
So from a global financial services and technology leader to someone who is developing the next great technologies for our nation and among those entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Brendan Hart. I enlisted in the Marines shortly after 9/11. I'm a New York guy. Don't come from a military family. Thought I could get into some trouble for a couple of years, so I enlisted. And what enlisting and what the Marine Corps gave me was an opportunity to sort of zoom out from what I was doing and learn about myself as an individual. So the Marine Corps gave me far more than I gave it as 03, 11, just one of the sort of faceless guys who carried a heavy pack. And so when I got out of the Marines, I transitioned into higher ed, and this is 2007. And so I got up to college in New Hampshire with two other Marines. One guy had been shot and almost bled out in Fallujah, and the other guy was tatted head to toe and sort of stood out like a sore thumb. I was the choir boy by comparison. And what we realized very quickly was that there was no structural support for non-traditional students, and in our case, people who had been in the military. So we, in sort of true veteran fashion, we ended up connecting with veterans throughout the country, and we started an organization called Student Veterans of America. And it started with 5 individuals at 5 universities, and now it's at 1,000 universities, and represents a majority of the transitioned military post 9/11. But we always knew that was a means to an end, right? Solving education was not the end in and of itself. And after having worked in the startup space for a number of years, I started Prosper, which is a veteran training and acceleration platform. And the idea here is that we are, as a community, underrepresented in the startup ecosystem. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case, but again, what we determined is we needed to solve our own problems. And so for all the folks who aren't going to work for Citi, we need to provide a strong alternative, and we need to do it in a inclusive, dynamic, market-facing way, right? It doesn't matter what Brendan Hart says, but it matters what the market says. And so I'm just going to close with this. I've thought about this a lot naturally, but a well-known Silicon Valley venture capitalist recently said in an interview, what are the three, when asked the question, what are the three characteristics that best represent entrepreneurial success in Silicon Valley? And this is him speaking. One is that they are relentlessly resourceful. Two is that they have raw IQ, which he defines as horsepower times tenacity. And three is that they're able to build what he calls plot idea maze. In my thinking, relentlessly resourceful, raw horsepower, and plot idea maze, which for military people, that's a systems thinker. You understand how air and land coordinate. So what we believe, what Prosper believes, is that the next generation of great companies are going to be started and driven by the post 9/11 generation. And we're proving that model. So happy to be here, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Brendan. So speaking of entrepreneurs and scholars and authors, Greg, delighted to have you with us.
Thanks, Susan. Hey, everybody. My name is Greg Berman. I started a little bit later in the military than Chris and Brendan. I was around 30, 31. Had spent a little bit of time on Wall Street, a little bit of time writing. In the national security world, was meeting a lot of peers who, by that time, 07, 08, were on their third, fourth deployment and just wanted to engage and do something. So I found out about a program where you could direct commission, joined up in the Navy, doing intel in the reserves, went home to tell my mom I was going to join up. First thing she did was start to cry. And then 5 seconds later, she looked at me and she said, "You're joining the Navy, but you get seasick." But anyway, so I was in the reserves for a couple of years, went on active duty from 11 to 12, Afghanistan. I was in the Commander's Initiative group, had a chance to work for General Petraeus and General Allen during my deployment. Didn't have a whole lot of time to consider what I was going to do when I got back. But after sort of returning and thinking about it for a little bit, got really excited about the idea of trying to build a new organization. The only thing I knew was that I really wanted it to be rooted in national service. That was about it. Wasn't sure beyond that what it would be. So I took a while to sort of explore. And in the months that I was doing that, I was experiencing a lot of media. And I was finding myself a little frustrated that so much of it tended to focus on the problems and the challenges, and a lot of it at its worst can sort of feel like noise, like one side barking at the other. And what I was really interested in, particularly having come from an experience where I was teammates with people who it was just all about problem solving and rolling up your sleeves and getting it done, were the problem solvers who were doing things to address our big national challenges, to innovate, to push us forward. And so we've essentially founded a company whose mission is to elevate those people and to drive action in support of them. So founded NationsWell, we think of ourselves as kind of a modern day media company. The mission is to power the solutions and innovations that will move our country forward. We do it through a digital media platform where we tell stories about people who are doing creative, effective things to solve big national challenges. One of our main areas of coverage is national service and veteran empowerment. So we're privileged to write a lot of stories, do a lot of video work on post 9/11 veterans, like Brendan, like Chris, people doing amazing things, inspiring things to support veterans, give them opportunities, cover a range of additional areas as well. We also have a membership community called the NationsWell Council, which is a membership community of leaders and innovators who share a passion for service. And then we also do impact campaigns. And that's what I've been up to for the last 3 years.
Great. Well, thank you. As you can see, we've got quite a richness of experience and passion and diversity on this panel. I think what we'd like to do over the next 20 minutes or so, kind of divide our conversation into two parts. The first to really also speak to our service members and veterans in the audience that are in the process of considering, if not already in the throes of their own career transition from uniform into the civilian sector, and then also go back to the employer side. I think that there are a lot of perspectives from both that our veterans, service members need to hear, that employers are saying, and that also very important messages that employers need to hear. At Monster and military.com, we've been doing a lot of data and surveys since 2011 through our Veteran Talent Index that we publish a couple of times a year to really look at what's happening in the veteran employment landscape. And really pleased that when we first started in 2011, the post 9/11 or Gulf War II era veterans, as the Census and Department of Labor like to call it, veterans, unemployment was approaching 13%. Higher than the average unemployment at the time. Was not great in America, but it was much higher than it should have been. And a lot of efforts, organizations like Citi, public and private partnerships that have banded together over the last several years to really help to drive those numbers down and create employment opportunities. In the course of that, when we first started our survey, the percentage of veterans that felt that they were prepared to transition was 37%. When we did our last survey at the end of 2015, that number was up to 68%. That has a lot to do with, I think, efforts the DoD and the military, but also, as importantly, the public-private partnership that's out there to help make this challenging and at any given time, sometimes an intimidating process, easier. At the same time, we also have seen the confidence level increase. So from 2011, about 39% of veterans felt that they were confident in finding a successful job. And that's just a JOB. We're not even talking about careers, which I think is something we want to get into up here, when they left military service. And today that number is up to 69% of those that we've surveyed. So I think that the trend line is really positive, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And certainly those numbers don't necessarily make those of you considering transition feel any more prepared as you're going forward. Biggest challenge that we've seen is communication. And how do you convey what it is that you've done in your career in military and how that relates on in the private sector side, particularly when there's an incredible sea of goodwill out there of folks that want to help you, but that don't necessarily appreciate, they respect but don't understand exactly what it is that you did. So I'll put it out to the panelists. If there are some suggestions, both from your own personal experience as well as other veterans that you've been working with and mentoring over the years, recommendations for how to approach that conversation and the communicating of your military skills and experience and how that relates into the private sector. Maybe start with you, Brendan.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question because our community certainly needs to communicate better, right? We use acronyms. We sort of talk about military things as if the receiver understands what our experience was. So I tend to approach it like we need to do we need to tend our own garden. But I also think the audience needs to receive it in a more interesting way. I go back to this one story, which was when Airbnb was founded, one of the original investors said, I missed this investment because I thought of the worst case scenario. I thought of, it's weird that you stay in someone's home. What happens if someone gets hurt? Or rather than the best case scenario, which was you can totally transform the way people travel. I think that's true here. Let's not think about charity, and let's think about opportunity. And we need to do a good job of explaining what it is that you do. You don't lead a battalion. You lead people who run a great operation. That's transferable. Leading a battalion is not. But think about that. Think about it out of civilian eyes, if that's a word. Your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
So we talked a little bit about jobs versus careers. I think the transition process starts very early. And the problem is that you're in the military, you're going through all these operational deployments. you don't often have time to step back and think, what do I want to do when I get out, and how do I prepare myself for that? It's really challenging. And then, you go to a TAPS class, then you're out on the street, and you're trying to think, how am I going to eat, and where am I going to live? How am I going to take care of my family? And so a lot of times, the numbers are improving, but we're very concerned about retention because we got to find that right fit where the person's going to grow and we can extract that value out of them, and build that career. So how do we do that? I think there's a couple of things that vets have going on that they don't even realize. They've got amazingly robust networks, right? There are people all over the place that want to help you. A lot of veterans will come to me and they'll say, well, what should I do? And I say, I don't know. You have to figure out what you want to do. And I think it really starts with the veteran reaching out to that network, understanding what's out there, and trying to do your best to identify that career where they can thrive. And then once you find out that you have that self-realization, there are all kinds of things out there, places we can resources out there. There are a number of VSOs, veteran support organizations, that work on developing talent. You got VOWs, you got the Jobs Mission, you got Hire Our Heroes. There are massive resources, but it really starts with the veteran, him or herself. So very, very important. The other thing that we struggle, frankly, is that we would love to get out to every single TAPS class. Very hard for us to do. I've got 2 military veteran recruiters. So how can I get to every TAPS class on every single base to get our story out, right? Hey, we're city. I've got tech jobs, et cetera. I got all over the country. So I think there's some technology that needs to evolve a little bit. I think there's some public-private partnerships that could emerge where we can work. In the Department of Army, as an example, I don't think there are any Army guys in here. They're actually launching an internship program. Learned about this last week, where they're going to give folks, 4 months out from their transition, an opportunity to partner with companies. But that partnership's only going to be successful if the veteran knows what they want to do. And so, I always push it back on the veteran. Figure out what you want to do, then we'll find you those resources.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice. And Greg, one aspect of that, at least in some of the workshops I've participated in, and I know that you've done a very good job, is storytelling. So as veterans are thinking about that transition, doing their homework to align themselves with possible good career paths and what they're interested in, how do you start to craft that story? How do you articulate who you are and what you can bring to an organization?
Well, I think veterans have huge capabilities. Chris alluded to a couple of their leadership, technical proficiencies. There are a range of really valuable things that veterans have to offer. So I guess, also sort of keying off of something Chris said, I guess there's probably just a little bit of entrepreneurial work to sort of figure out what you want to do, take advantage of those networks. The other thing in addition to networks that veterans have is a lot of goodwill on the other end. I think, there are people who graduate sort of undergraduate liberal arts colleges who think nothing of sort of calling, emailing, hustling, sort of asking for a meeting, asking for advice. I think that I've noticed that for some reason that veterans are a little bit more reticent to do it. Maybe sometimes it feels like you're sort of asking for help or you're inconveniencing someone. But I would sort of encourage people to think about it totally in the opposite way, to sort of lean into that. And in fact, more likely than not, you're going to be doing the person on the other end of that call or email a service, because they'll learn about you and your experience, and they're more likely than not very keen to be of service given the things that you've done. And in fact, veterans are probably going to go do a great job, and so there's value there. So I think those are sort of some of the things. And I suppose in the process of having those conversations, doing that work, thinking through the applicability of military experience into the private sector, social sectors, or whatever it is, I think that's kind of probably where the story emerges.
Mm-hmm. No, that's helpful. In your experiences, certainly when you're in uniform, you are encouraged, trained on the power of teamwork. But yet, it seems that many of the veterans going through the transition process look very inward, think they've got to figure this out on their own, and they can do it all by themselves, right? Yeah. Certainly not probably the most effective way to network, or let alone to grow and understand the opportunities that are out there. What are, you mentioned a few earlier, Chris, some of the VSO and the programs that are there, but is there advice you can give to veterans or those that are working to help them on how to approach those organizations, right? What to look for and align to what their particular needs are? or how to best leverage that?
Yeah, when you run a business, you're always looking for very hungry and junior talent, right? Because as people get more senior, they get very expensive, and you always need to build out that base. And so I think Greg said it very well. It's good business to hire veterans, and it's very important to be aggressive and to leverage those networks. People are going to want to help you as you make the transition. In finance, we've got Veterans on Wall Street. We've got a website. Each of our firms has something as well. Citysalutes.com. Go to it. Contact us. We'll have a veterans recruiter reach out to you. I think there's a couple things you need to think of. Number one, where do I want to work? Right? A very interesting question. You've been all over the country and the world, and there are different industries associated with that geography. And so, by finding out the corporations where you want to live, it's very important. What sector do you want to work in? And then, we're really getting better at building intercompany networks. Like I said, VALS is formed around financial services. Defense is incredibly well organized, as you can imagine. We learned so much from the defense industry because there's so many vets, they know how to organize. And as time goes on, we're getting better and better and reaching out. So really, my vision would be, contact one of us, whether it's in VALS or something else, and we can give you that entire network. And that's what we do. I mean, when someone's interested in finance, I say, here are the guys at Citi, come in for a day, I'll put you in front of all the desks. After that, I want you to go to JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank and Goldman. I'm very comfortable with the culture I have at Citi. I want you to go see what else is out there, and then we want you to come back and we'll hire you. So, but they're good partners, and it's important just to tap into that network.
Brendan?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the Marine Corps is smaller, but really, we're 2 degrees of separation from anyone you want to know. So if you're interested in finance, pick up the phone and call Chris. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, pick up the phone and call me, or Greg. And we may not have the answer, but we'll put you in touch with someone who has the answer. But the other point is, it's very funny that the entrepreneurs with whom we work are dynamite. I mean, super talented, except they're all universally pretty bad at sales. And they're not even selling themselves at this point. They're selling their company. And it's part of the culture. It's part of the culture of how we grew up professionally. But it doesn't help on the other side, right? And we need to sort of unlearn some of that stuff. And we need to connect with other people who have developed the skill set that is helpful and successful on the back end of service, because you may have served for a short period of time, but you're going to be on the backside for a longer time than you are in service, and it's something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, Susan, I would just mention, I think a couple of organizations and ways to plug in. I think either as a veteran transitioning or an employer, investor, individual willing to sort of engage and be helpful in that process. Because I think, the good news is there's so many models out there that are working and effective. I mean, you heard about one with Chris and VALS and what Brendan is doing. But just to sort of throw out a few things, for folks sort of transitioning out of the military who maybe are a little younger, a little less professionally experienced, educated, there's some neat initiatives. I mean, Starbucks, for example, is committed to hiring 10,000 veterans to get them jobs. They offer tuition-free college education. So that's sort of one model. We did a story on a group called Rags of Honor out of Chicago, started by a really terrific guy. He's aiming to be the largest single employer of sort of in need, at-risk veterans. They sell T-shirts, sweatshirts. They have clients like the NBA. And most of the folks that they've hired actually are veterans who've experienced homelessness or maybe are at risk of experiencing homelessness. So he's doing a terrific thing, and that's kind of a neat model. You can look to the social sector. There are organizations like The Mission Continues and Team Rubicon. I suspect a lot of folks in the room have heard of them, but what they try to do is to bring in veterans to continue their service with The Mission Continues community service projects, with Team Rubicon in disaster recovery situations all around the world, deploying veterans to be of assistance using the military skill set. And so what they're doing is doing great social good, but also providing veterans a continued sense of mission, purpose, community, things that are really important. So maybe that's sort of part of the end, or maybe it's sort of a means to part sort of experiencing the social sector as sort of part of the transition to the private sector or somewhere else. And then there are two other things that sort of come to mind that are interesting models. One is a new group out of San Francisco called Breakline, actually started by a college classmate of mine. And so what she found spending a lot of time around Stanford Business School was that even though the folks coming out of GSB were incredibly sort of high-performing military officers and had gotten into Stanford Business School, they were still kind of having challenges figuring out what kind of roles were right for them, what kind of companies were right for them. At the same time, you're in the Valley, there are all these great technology companies desperately trying to find talent and tap into that kind of talent pool. So she sort of developed a program where she's brought them together, brings in cohorts of these people out of MBA programs or elsewhere, brings in these companies, they talk about the opportunities they have, and the ideal state is that those sort of lead to placement and opportunities for folks. Finally, another group that's sort of come on my radar recently is called Anacapa Partners, which is a private equity firm that is kind of the search fund model. So what they do is they try to find great entrepreneurs, help them sort of find a company to go and acquire and run and grow and exit. And they've been doing this for sort of decades and doing it really well. So the next evolution is to try to find great veterans to partner with and bring on as entrepreneurs, back them, and let them sort of lead and grow these companies. So those are, I think, 6 things that are really different, reaching different kind of veteran populations in different ways, all sort of part of the solution and things that folks can plug into.
Right, and depending on where your passions are, where your inclinations and your career vision for yourself, so many pathways to follow. Before, I want to circle back on the entrepreneurship piece too, but before I do that as well, just on military.com, our Veteran Employment Center, we profile and index some of these new organizations aren't on our radar yet, but we'll get them on there. But it's also a great way online to research and be connected to and find out whether they're industry focused or specific pathways or organizations that you can connect into. But along those lines with entrepreneurship, and for those veterans who choose to, really, not like the folks here on the stage, but to really carve their own path, what are you seeing trends-wise on the opportunity and maybe some of the challenges? I think the last data that I saw from Census Bureau, over 2.4 million veteran-owned businesses just in the US that were employing themselves 5 million individuals. Now, these aren't necessarily veterans employing veterans, although that's certainly a trend that I've seen. I don't know if you all have seen that as well. But generating billions of dollars into this economy. So for those inclined in that direction, Brendan, where are they going for capital? How hard is it? How easy is it? What are some of the challenges?
Yeah, entrepreneurship is hard, right? For everyone, including us. But we're sort of centralized and decentralized. At UCLA, there's more than 2,000 student veterans. Right? At Columbia University in New York, there's 400 or 500. These are well-trained and well-educated people. That's uncommon in our society. You're either trained or educated. We're both, right? That's a really good thing. And so, but entrepreneurship is difficult. And so what Prosper is trying to do is we think of ourselves as an infrastructure entity, right? That controls for externalities, which allows you a period of time to just execute on your idea, and it's going well. The interesting thing is that the military is the most diverse institution in the country. So if you want to solve diversity, solve the military thing, the veteran transition thing, and what we have, what our community has, which I would argue is a massive strategic advantage over every other community, is this deep affinity and this deeply shared experience, right? We walk into any room and we instantly know each other. That is currency that is incalculable, and it's your job to execute upon that, right? Which is basically the spirit of what we're trying to say. You have currency, you have experience, you have skill, and now it's your time to execute.
Well, good. So for those employers in the room or investors, so we've gotten you excited about the opportunity to bring this talent into your organizations. We know that that's not always easy to do. There are quite a few organizations that are battle tested in this effort. Chris, I think you spoke to the defense industry, which traditionally has been a very natural pathway for many individuals that have been in uniform, then to continue in the civilian side in the defense industry. But that's no longer limited to that, and I think whether it's financial services industry, certainly the IT sector has caught up in that area as well. But from an employer's point of view, what is the importance, let's talk about the recruiters,
Yep.
of getting, we see a lot of C-suite members, the leadership that are committed to bringing veterans onto their teams, which is fantastic. And if you don't have that leadership at the top, it's not going to go down very quickly. But then you still have the operational aspect of finding and recruiting and actually hiring and onboarding individuals into your organization. Veterans may be definitely a goal of the organization, but the ultimate goal with your hiring managers, I need this talent in that desk or on that line or where have you, right now. So what are some of the advice, best practices, advice that you would give to employers for navigating that?
Yeah, I think there's a tops down and bottoms up approach. So our chairman of the board is a Marine. Chairman of the board before that was an Army veteran, Dick Parsons and Mike O'Neill. So we have that senior support. And City was founded to fund the War of 1812, if you didn't know that. Now you do. So we got the top, right? We also have very senior members. And from the bottom, once we established a network, it did a couple of things. First, it brought a lot of visibility to veterans in the workplace from the top. And so nobody knew Dick Parsons was a veteran at the time. And so for the employers in the room, what I would encourage you to do, if you haven't done so already, establish a veterans affinity group. You can have your veterans involved if you have any, or don't, just people who care about veterans. And what that does is it gives you the attention of the top, and you get that senior buy-in. But then you can leverage that network to really bring your recruiters up to speed. And so before we had City Salutes, our network started to grow. And the veterans within our networks would actually teach the recruiters, hey, this is what it means to be an 05, and this is what it means to be an infantryman or artilleryman. And we're able to even pick out the resumes that didn't make a lot of sense. So this guy, no, he's not a fit for us. Maybe over here we can do something. And so establish a network. If you don't know how to establish one, we will establish one for you. We've done that. We've got the bylaws. We've got everything ready to go. We'll sit down with you and we'll help you launch that network. And then it's a matter of getting that tops down buy-in as well, and then you're off to the races.
Good, good. Brendan, you talked about the cultural gaps that may exist, both from the veterans coming into the organization or the organization themselves that don't know what's an MOS, what's an MOC, what is a battalion.
Yeah.
What are some things that you've seen working for employers to start to bridge that cultural competency gap, if you will, in their organizations?
Yeah, I think we need to do a better job of connecting with people who have transitioned before us, right? I've described my experience in every way that you don't want to, right? So, and many of my colleagues and friends have done the same. But we're beginning to build up institutional knowledge, which is a really good thing. And things like affinity groups within large organizations, things like telling the stories of these individuals really helps. But there's a lexicon that sort of is about explaining what we did in service and how that can apply externally. But it's just, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be willing to learn. And we do that well. And employers have to be able to learn about this community. Why? Not because it's charity, but because on average, we're pretty good employees, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So take those extra steps towards that understanding.
Yeah.
Greg, you speak a lot with the corporate world and with employers as well as representing the voices of veterans. Are there any examples that you can call on of organizations that really made a commitment, perhaps in a risky way, but they saw the output on the other side for trying to bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the one that sort of comes to mind is I already mentioned earlier, which is Starbucks, which has sort of been forward-leaning and committing from the corporate world, hire 10,000 people, I think either veterans or military spouses of veterans.
Right.
They've followed through with that. I think they're at 5,500 or 6,000. Not yet at the goal, which I think they have until 2018 to do. I haven't seen sort of like data or employment performance metrics or anything like that, but my strong sense is that they view that as the right thing to do, but a really positive thing for their business as well.
Yeah, I do have a little data on that actually, now that I asked you the question. So in the Veteran Talent Index survey that we've done in our last iteration, 90% of veterans said they would be more inclined to work for an organization that expressed themselves or branded themselves as veteran friendly. Now, there's a lot that one could do to claim that as an employer, but certainly, having that statement on your website, in your recruiting materials, going to online or offline events, hiring programs where you can demonstrate that you are interested and willing to hire veterans certainly can help that too.
Two quick examples. One is Uber committed to hiring 50,000 veterans and spouses, and they reached that mark. And the interesting thing is that on average, veterans are more highly rated than non-veteran drivers. Right? So that's just a data point and an important one. And the second, I had this great experience not too long ago of going down and seeing an Amazon distribution operation. It's 4,500 people. It's 1 million square feet, and the entire upper chain of command was military, every single one of them. And what that is a massive operation that the military taught these individuals, and it was applied. And now I don't know if Amazon has the goal, but they're running a massive distribution center on the back of this very talented pool of candidates.
Yeah, it's a great case study. Is there anything, Chris, you've seen, and obviously you've talked about Citi and your incredible Citi Salutes program, but some of the other partners?
Yeah, so within recruiting, within VOWS, again, we want to be veterans first and competitors second. So our recruiters actually have bilateral conversations and try to share best practices. And so for the corporations out there, please tap into us. We'll give you all the experience. We've got nothing to hide. The other thing is once a year we have a symposium. Generally we hold it at Goldman Sachs because they've got a nicer building than we do. And it's been 2 sessions. In the morning we bring the vets in. We talk about things like this, and in the afternoon we bring the corporations in and we share best practices. So again, we'd love for you to tap into VOWS and our symposium.
Yeah. Another interesting resource, the Consumer Electronics Association was a founder and launched U.S. Tech Vets. Monster and military are partner of that. It's a free resource for their members and for any veterans. Employers can post their jobs for free. They can search on the resume database of individuals and be matched them that are interested in coming to work. And that could be traditional IT jobs, but also customer service, for example, and the whole range from financial services and everything else in between. So it's a phenomenal way of using technology, like you were talking about earlier.
There are a lot of jobs out there. I mean, there are a lot of officers in the room right now, but over 50% of our jobs, you don't even require a college degree. And who would have thought? Citi, right? And so make sure you get the word down to your enlisted men and women that we have opportunities for them. We have opportunities for them to grow. We can give them employment while they're leveraging their GI Bill, whether it's a teller or call center, again, throughout the country and beyond.
Yeah, well, and on that note too, and given your history and experience with Student Veterans of America and everything that they're doing across the country on our campuses, the post 9/11 GI Bill, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is an incredible resource, I think, for our veterans and military families, for those who choose to elect it for their spouses or for their dependents. And our research has shown that over 83% of those military personnel, either who have transitioned in the next year or plan to in the next 5, will be utilizing that either to continue for an advanced degree or for certification. and training into jobs. And that's something that many employers aren't necessarily aware of. But do you see any trends in that area? Are you hearing from campuses? Is this the benefit that people are using undergraduate work? Are they going to graduate work?
Yeah, both. On Saturday, I had dinner with a friend and co-founder of SVA who did his undergraduate work at UCLA. When he finished in 2009, there were 150 vets, and now there's 2,200. So that's not UCLA saying we want to be patriotic. That's UCLA saying these are smart, capable people who are going to represent our university well. And universities across the country are doing this, right? Which is a really interesting thing, because right now there is a massive community of well-trained, well-educated individuals that have transitioned out of the military and are doing interesting, creative things. Many of them are working at Citi. Many of them are people that are operating in the entrepreneurial space. But universities get this. And I would argue most large entities, institutions, or corporations that really care about performance get this as well. We just don't tell the story as well as we need to.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's getting there. Well, good.
Yep.
I'd like to open it up to questions or conversation from the floor. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Connie Milstein. I'm founder of Blue Star Families. I think I can probably project without this. Unfortunately, I love listening to all your positive stories. I also run the Dog Tag Bakery in Washington, D.C. And my experience, unfortunately, has not been as rosy or as positive as any of you sitting here, because I'm dealing with I guess it must be the fourth cohort of disabled veterans that I am trying to transition from the military back to the civilian lifestyle. And unfortunately, it has been a rough one. It has not been an easy ride. With all the organizations, you're all assuming, and from what I'm understanding from you, is that everyone comes out of the military just the way they went in. I mean, they go in, they come out, they're perfect. That's not my experience. My experience has been that almost everyone, the men, the women that I have dealt with, and I am dealing with still, have been very specific in terms of what their needs are. They have had tremendous difficulty joining up in terms of any of the things that you've all spoken about, which I love. I mean, I'd love for that all to be true. That has not been my experience in terms of the young men and the young women who've come through my program. I started out at Dog Tag Bakery with a Jesuit father who had been born without an arm, so he was used to dealing with people with disabilities. His story, unfortunately, he passed away in December, so I became the Jewish godmother and the Jesuit priest. We were an incredible team, and we tried to do the best we could in terms of helping those who were unable really to help themselves. I just came back from Capitol Hill. It's been not an easy transition for everyone. And I think this is something that all of you who, paint this wonderful rosy story, and I wish it were so, but I think what you need to think about, and what I would ask you to think about, and I will call on all of you again, is how do we take care of the people who come out of their military service not the way they went into their military service, and they're not ready. They they have told me, they have begged me. They've said, open up a dog tag bakery in every city in the United States. Open up a place for us so we can have the time to transition back from the military to civilian life. And I thought to myself, I spoke on behalf of the father the other day, and I said, okay, we're all civilians. It was a group of basically civilians. And I said, okay, imagine yourselves waking up one day, I mean, you're a civilian, right? And you go to sleep, and the next day you wake up, and all of a sudden, you're a part of the military. How do you deal with that? All of a sudden, your life has changed. It is not the same world that you went to sleep with, that you woke up with. And I say this, unfortunately, because my experience has not been, I mean, I'm dealing with people who are broken.
Right.
Who have been, not because they want it, I mean, not that they don't want to succeed, but who've had to either be institutionalized when they've come out of the military. They've had help, but they've all said they have not had enough help.
Sure.
And I am I mean, I do small, and they've actually said, we don't want large cohorts. We want to be in groups of 12 or less. We love to relate to one another. We feel really comfortable when we're together, but feel very uncomfortable being, you know, we all think, okay, we come out,
Sure.
we just transition.
Yeah,
And I think,
do you go ahead?
just to say, you know, the 45 minutes that we have up there, first of all, thank you for everything
I'm
you've done with
sorry,
Blue
I-
Star Families. No, and especially Dog Tag Bakery. I live in D.C. and a proud customer and really respect all the work that you're doing. And I don't think that any of us could represent, in a short amount of time, every experience that our service members and our veterans go through. And one thing I say repeatedly, a veteran's not a veteran's not a veteran, and everyone's story and situation is unique. And one of the things that we talked about even before this is there's a lot that we could put forward and talk, and not everyone is easy, and we wanted to talk about some of the elephants in the room, is how we had, you know, characterized that on our call. So I think you've raised a really good, multiple really good issues. One are certainly with our disabled veterans and those that have experienced either visible or invisible wounds, and some of the struggles when they're coming back into the civilian sector and the private sector. And then, and some of those are more significant and more severe than others, but in other cases, I don't think any of us could say you can go to war and not be impacted by the individuals you're serving with, by the environment. And you know, you raise a really good point, and it's not something that, you know, we had time to get into today. But
yeah, well, first of all, I mean, thank you those are incredible initiatives. So thank you, and you bring in, I think, an incredibly important angle to this discussion, and one that if you know, we would have done a disservice if it wasn't sort of fully brought in.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you spoke up. I've also been working on veteran homelessness for the past couple of years. I think it's 22 veterans kill themselves a day. And
I didn't
this,
want to bring that part up.
yeah, look, this is, I think people in this room understand this very
Yeah.
well. This is this profound collateral cost of the experience that military service members have been in for these past years. But at the same time, you know, I think part of the concern, and maybe the implicit concern amongst a lot of us, is I think for so much of the American population, that is how they view veterans, as sort of these broken souls, as these charity cases, as maybe, hey, do I want to hire this person? What are they? Do they have PTSD? Are they a liability? And I think that you know, what we all have to do is have kind of, I think, a synthesized narrative and message in there are a lot in integrating your point, which is that there are a lot of people that are, you know, struggling and need all the help and support.
A different kind of service
Sure.
from all of you
sure. Well,
Yeah,
and
in the community.
Can I speak to this? So I think that depends on when they transition as well, because I just went through the transition assistance program. and having talked to my father who retired from the Navy, and even people that, in the past 5 to 10 years, it's gotten so much better. That program is really helping people translate their skills, and then also the medical and all the stuff that you have to go through when you get out. It's really extensive what the VA is doing to help these veterans transition be successful.
And I think, go ahead.
Ronald Funderburg here. I'm curious whether or not you have any best practices.
Sir, I think
I'm
those
curious.
guys are desperately trying to catch
Sorry.
it.
My name is Ronald Funderburg. I'm curious whether or not you have any best practices for employers that have non-veteran employees that need to adopt discipline or best practices that come out of military training, like showing up on time, being serious about what they're doing and taking pride in what they do. So my brother and my family, we run a number of services-oriented business with hourly wage workers, and we need help trying to incorporate better practices in managing these people. So any best practices you can share?
Sure.
Well, I'll tell you this quick story about a conversation I had earlier today with a non-veteran, and he basically said, you guys are so disciplined. You get up every morning and you make your bed, and I said it's not about discipline. It's about a sense of the first thing that you do in the morning is excellent, right? In just a small way, but making your bed takes you a few minutes, but it starts the day in a good way, and extrapolated that sort of a sense of excellence in everything you do, things big and small. And I think that's something that's alive, right? You sort of know whether or not the institution, the business, the operation, or whatever, prioritizes excellence. So I would maintain accountability. I think that's a really important part.
Sir, do you know what an NCO is? Do you?
No.
No, you know what a staff NCO is. So there
Excellent.
are certain folks in the military that are exactly what you're looking for. I would suggest that you hire, vet the right person and hire an NCO or a staff NCO, a non-commissioned officer, and they will set your team in the right direction.
Yeah.
Hi.
All right.
My name is Yolanda Parker, and for the employers in the room, I don't know if you mentioned this before or not, but there are a couple of really good reasons other than the ones you guys mentioned. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit that you get for veterans, that's Form 8850. Look that up. You can get money for hiring veterans. So while you're being altruistic, you can also get a tax credit. The other thing is ask the veteran about accessing their blue button data, because in addition to the medical records, they can also get their employment history. And you might be able to say, okay, this person was in, requisitions or something. I need a purchasing officer. So those are the two things that you should definitely look into: blue button data and 88 and the WOTC,
One of the
Work
cha-
Opportunity Tax Credit.
One of the challenges we have is a lot of vets don't self-identify.
Right.
And so, to the service people in here, tell your people to identify, because it helps us, it helps you.
Right. HR offices certainly appreciate and can take advantage of many of those credits. Can be anywhere from $3,000 up to $12,000. Yes, sir.
Thanks, guys. So one of the quick comments here, you brought up sales, and veterans are lousy at selling themselves. I'm on the venture capital side now, and one of the things I see regularly is almost a timid nature in terms of how veterans present themselves when they're pitching. And it comes across as an insecurity of being afraid to stand up and be able to say, here is what we do, and here is why we're solving a problem that's so much better than anyone else. And I don't care if you're coming from a soft background or you're just in the infantry. This is something that, if there was something from an entrepreneurial perspective, I would be training and teaching and learning, is walk in there with that set of confidence, that you've got the skills and the training that most people don't have. And it is unfortunately something we see far too often, particularly among the veterans versus entrepreneurs who are coming out of a liberal arts degree, who aren't afraid to pick up a phone and call anyone and get rejected, so on and so forth. And there's an art to that.
Yeah, great
Good.
point. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Coleman, and you said you're out of D.C., which is great. I lead up the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation, and I also lead up the Workforce Development Division for the county.
Fantastic.
And as you know, we've got a brand new casino and resort over in National Harbor, $1.3 billion, and they are going to be recruiting to find 3,600 employees to fill that facility. And they start off at pretty good salaries. I'd love to talk to you about how I could help that company, MGM, to be able to get as many veterans as possible to fill those jobs. And they have very high expectations for customer service. They have a ton of different types of jobs, from dealers where they're making 55 and 60 grand, all the way up to directors of marketing and sales. And trying to find veterans is not easy, but I'd love to get your ideas on how best to be able to get as many veterans as possible to be able to interview for those 3,600 jobs.
Deutsche Bank did the exact same thing with the Cosmopolitan in Vegas. So we can put you in touch
Yeah,
with them.
definitely. We can share best practices. We'll exchange cards later. Thank you.
Hello, Lieutenant Hawley. So this, I've been given 60 seconds. I'm down to 55. To your question, sir, or statement, one of my issues is when I'm not in uniform, I can do anything. I mean, sell anything, do whatever I want, and still be respectful. I'm still the same person. But when I'm in uniform, I have a fear of portraying the military in a way that somebody else might not like. So perfect example, if I were wearing a uniform right now, there's no way I would have stood up today. But since I'm not, even though I'm active duty, I felt like I could say this. So how do you, am I down to like 10 seconds? How do you bridge that gap? How do you talk to people when you're in uniform the way that I talk to people when I'm not, and still be the same person? So
You got to practice.
Yeah.
You have to practice, right? So we take people into our organization all the time for informational interviews. So take a little bit of leave, meet people, talk, learn the vernacular. And you have to practice to get it right. And then all of a sudden you look like someone that we want to hire. You talk like someone that we want to hire. You got all those skills, and then it works out.
Yeah,
I just want to throw this out there as well. In relation to practice, look, Steve Jobs, when he gave his presentations, the reason why he was so good, it wasn't because it was natural and it was this off-the-cuff one-time thing. He practiced that over and over and over again. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're coming in with your pitch on yourself, your team, your business, I don't care if you stand in front of the mirror, right? Stand in front of the mirror and practice that over and over and over again and get comfortable with, I'm going to nail this. And I know this better than any investor who I'm sitting in front of. Because most investors, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
yeah. And really, set up your iPhone and record yourself.
Yeah.
It's a sort of hokey thing, but what you're...
I just recorded myself right now.
Yeah. I thought Driscoll was doing that. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Jen Tribush. I run State Street's Alternative Solutions Group. So I have 8 passes right here for anyone that is interested in learning about financial services, alternative investments. I run a sales team. Happy to give anyone some advice, and would love to talk to you about that as well.
Good. Fantastic. Okay. Well, really appreciate my exceptional panel up here today. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.